Java 25 just dropped with a lot of new features that make the language easier to work with and more performant. If you haven't kept up with Java in recent years, you are in for a big surprise, because these days it is far from being the old enterprise dinosaur that people love to make fun of. Over the last few releases, the language has been going through one of the most active development phases in its entire history. Features like pattern matching, records, virtual threads, and sealed classes have already modernized how we write Java, and with this release, things get even better. First of all, we finally get support for primitive types in patterns, instance of, and switch statements. Until now, pattern matching worked only with reference types, which meant you had to rely on verbose casts or manual checks when working with primitives. But with this change, you can finally match primitives directly. While this might not look like much at first, note that switching becomes much cleaner, and you can now, for instance, replace conditional expressions with a Boolean switch. Or you can switch on larger values without falling back to nested if statements. So you get the point. This change makes the developer experience more uniform and aligned with modern standards. Another important update is the finalization of module import declarations. If you've ever written a Java file where the import section was longer than the actual code, you'll appreciate this one. Now, instead of having to list every package individually, you can import an entire module in one go. This single import line pulls in all the packages exported by Java base, stream, and function. This is really convenient, but, of course, there's a big trade-off. Importing whole modules can lead to naming conflicts. So if two modules export a class with the same simple name, you'll get an ambiguity error until you resolve it with a more specific import. But, clearly, Java is focused on removing some of the boilerplate and ceremony needed to write even small programs. And this is obvious with their proposal for compact source files and instance main methods. You can declare a main as an instance method, drop public static void main, and even skip the class declaration entirely for tiny programs. The launcher picks a launchable main automatically, so if a class has a main function, it runs that. Otherwise, it runs void main and constructs the class with a no-argument constructor. And what's important to remember is that compact files also auto-import everything exported by Java base, so common APIs are available immediately. As you can see, Java has really come a long way from a few years back, when you had to write all this pile of code just to achieve the same thing we did earlier with way less code. Another feature that finally graduated in Java 25 is flexible constructor bodies. For decades, constructors in Java were shackled by one strict rule. The very first statement had to be a call to either super or this. If you wanted to validate arguments, compute values, or initialize fields before calling your superclass constructor, you had to jump through hoops like inline static helper methods. With Java 25, that restriction is lifted. You can now write statements in the prologue of a constructor before the super or this call, as long as you don't touch the not yet initialized instance. So you can fail fast on invalid inputs or prep arguments without resorting to awkward workarounds. Another major update in Java 25 is the finalization of scoped values. This feature has been in incubation and preview for several releases, and now it's officially part of the platform. The main idea is simple. Sometimes you need to pass immutable context data down a call chain without littering every single method signature with extra parameters. Thread local allowed you to do that, but this approach was kind of flawed because you had to remember to clear values, the lifetime was unbounded, and with virtual threads it became even more expensive because every thread needed its own copy. Scoped values fix this by letting you bind some immutable data to a scope, and everything inside that scope can read it without you having to pass it around as parameters. Once the scope ends, the value is automatically gone, so you don't get leaks or surprises later. But the updates don't end with language features. There are lots of other important updates which make the language more pleasant to work with on a daily basis. On the performance side, compact object headers shrink memory overhead, ahead-of-time profiling and ergonomics speed up startup time, and the Vector API continues to evolve, giving developers access to highly optimized CPU instructions for compute-heavy tasks like AI inference. And if you care about observability, the JDK Flight Recorder keeps getting more powerful with new features for CPU time profiling, cooperative sampling, and detailed method timing and tracing, helping you spot bottlenecks and optimize code without having to blindly debug your app. Please let me know in the comments if you want more Java content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel since we are getting close to that 100k subscribers mark.